All right, last session of the day. I'm excited. If we could go around and have everyone give a little bit of an intro on themselves and what they're building, that would be awesome.
Yeah, hello everyone. So I have the worst position, right? I'm right. I'm going to answer first every question. Maybe we shift and shuffle a bit. I'm Herelle. I'm CEO and founder of Crunch. So Crunch has been building this decentralized network of 8,000 machine learning engineers. We have about 1,200 PhD, and we build machine learning models for large institutions. We work with the third largest sovereign wealth fund. We work with one of the largest investment banks. So we really help them, find the brain that they cannot hire and build the models that they cannot do internally, basically.
Nice. Hi, everyone. I'm Dmitriy. I'm a partner with Archetype. We are a New York City-based crypto venture fund. We invest between 1 to 5 million checks. We love DePin. We love AI. We have 6 investments in AI, 3 in DePin. So this is at the intersection of stuff I like.
Fantastic. Hey, everybody. I'm Trevor from Rendo Network. We're a distributed, decentralized network of consumer GPUs for motion graphics artists. We help those artists render creations on the biggest stages in the world, including Hollywood, large concerts, external areas like the Sphere, and even NASA. We do it at scale with 1.5 million frames rendered a month, and we're now trying to turn that power towards AI.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. My name is Jing. I'm the co-founder of Altex. We are actually one of the earliest builders in DePin space. We helped kind of coin DePin as a term with Masari. One of the leading infrastructure to provide all the modules to accelerate the build and scale of DePin networks, specifically on the supply side. But currently, with the emergent demand side from all the AI and the physical AI system, now we are expanding our open ecosystem to AI space. We help enable all the real-time agent and also physical AI to access the live data directly from the machine or from the machine and human coordination. So that's why we are very excited to this panel and talk to all those experts here.
Awesome, thank you. My first question for the group here, do you believe that DePins can serve as the frontier backbone for large-scale AI training and inference workloads?
I could take it, I guess. I think I have good and bad news. I don't think we can replace hyperscalers. And I'm happy for someone to take the other side of that bet. I think the reason is because it's incredibly expensive to train frontier models. And to do that, you need very high quality hardware. When you look at NVIDIA, for example, you have the Vera Rubin chips that are coming out at the end of next year. You have the Feynman chips that are coming out at the end of 2028. These each double in performance as individual chips. They increase super linearly as clusters. The scale is insane. Like we're talking about exaflops of performance. And who gets those machines first? It's the hyperscalers. I don't think DePin networks are in a place today to place billion-dollar pre-orders. And I think that's the harsh reality of it. On the other side, I do think it can complement. I think about what's DePin good for. It is global cost arb and global idle capacity utilization. And what happens when you still have Blackwells, the A100s, H100s. Over the next 1, 2, 3 years, we're going to have millions to tens of millions of these out on the market. Usually this goes to third parties like CoreWeave and other resellers. And I think we're going to have a market structure kind of like Bitcoin, where you'll have data centers in parts of the world with cheaper electricity, and you can actually have these clusters that can do moderate inference workloads. So to me, it's kind of like the DePin mullet.
I'd love to take the against that. So I think it's right to think you've got a mountain of high-end GPUs being hoarded. Even not a mountain, a small number. We're talking less than 10 million on the one side of these high-end GPUs. And on the other side of the valley, you've got 300 million consumer GPUs that could be used for this. And there's definitely been a blocker to moving forward. And when you look back over the last 6 months, the blockers started to fall. It started first with open models and open weights, which was sort of a first step towards being able to run inference or do some other small aspects of it. When you go on 6 months from that, I think we hit test time learning with the DeepSeek folks, and that was absolutely critical because that showed a 50% actual improvement on training from some of these centralized models. What we saw yesterday from a group called Publicis Research was actually the first paper showing decentralized consumer training being done at the same performance as centralized. And I was shocked because to me that's sort of been the bastion or the blocker for training really even being in the conversation of something a decentralized network could do. So I honestly believe just given the need and the gap, these things will change over time. But to answer your question about do I think DePin is well suited to doing it, I really do. We've shown at scale how DePin has worked for rendering. And I honestly believe there's as strong, if not a larger, opportunity for the same here as we move into AI.
Yeah, maybe I want to add on that. As a kind of Silicon Valley-based project, we have the opportunity to talk to all types of AI company. I would kind of agree, like for general purpose model, like, training, it's very hard because the cost, speed, latency, all the things are the major kind of concern. But now we see like the entire model industry, they get into more like a verticalized, which means like each of the models, they have to be kind of more vertical, specifically to certain kind of domain. And then you will see like the larger problem for them, instead of the cost or like, the other issues, is about how they can kind of like get a scalable data training or data for a specific domain and at a global scale. And in this case, actually, there's no any kind of centralized or closed source community that can support that. If there's no such type of access, and then which means like their innovation really kind of restricted. So in that case, we feel like there's a huge, that's why like we would call it a kind of emergent market or the emergent demand from those kind of physical AI or like a verticalized model company. They come to us and say, hey, if you will be able to enable us have the access to those kind of live data or data training completed by like maybe a small scale or maybe like in very kind of scattered or like, niche market, they need a specific profile of the data trainer or specific profile of the data sets they need. Yeah, so that's, yeah.
And I think I can rebound on what you just said. For example, we are training at Crunch a specialized model, and the goal of that LLM is to extract time series. So it's very specialized. You do kind of very advanced NLP on a lot of data, but you use a model that doesn't need that many tokens, right? Like the biggest companies, like, because there's tons to debunk in that question. Like, what is AI is just the worst, starter, because we need to figure out what it is. There is AI applications that are composed of a lot of models. In AI applications, you have compute, you have models, you have blah, blah, blah. This kind of arguments. But specific example here, we just need like a million token to actually extract time series on financial data for this specific use case. So like the GPU-wise is not even that much of a thing. It's more of a cost thing. If I can do that very, very cheap, then it gets super interesting. And this is where I think DePin, for example, can offer like 10x discount on the same GPU. Now, obviously, the big startups, from California that raise billions, and they will take the majority of that compute power for sure. But on the other hand, there is tons of people that can access this model thanks to the DePin protocol at a super cheap price, start to serve their customer, have a super low CapEx, and launch project very much in the DePin style. And I think this is where DePin is really going to make a big difference.
Absolutely agree. I'm curious on any unique data sets that any of you are seeing within DePin that maybe enable training on specific data that hasn't been unlocked in AI training thus far, or maybe specific data sets that maybe haven't been curated at all up until this point.
I mean, I've seen some interesting ones, probably around embodied AI, around training for autonomous vehicles and humanoids. One fun project is called Frodobots. So you can have a little like robot that you remote control, and you race other robots out on the street, and they use that. They sell that data to autonomous vehicle companies. I think that's pretty fun. And then another is called a Reborn, where it's kind of like a Whoop, but you wear it on your wrists, your ankles, your waist, your hips, and I think on your head. So it's a lot. There is primary utility for people, which is they want to use like digital beings, like virtual avatars, and you get quite specific motion with that. And they're using that. They're selling it to companies who are training humanoid robots. So some fun examples. I haven't seen it at scale. I think still open question on like willingness to pay, but some good stuff.
I think there is some super cool example on that things, but I don't think that's one of the best, implication or the best consequences of DePin. But yeah, you have all heard about grass and etc. So you can be paid to kind of share your data and etc. But these are things that was there on the web for long. I remember back then I used to receive Satoshi for having a banner of advert on top of my browser back then. So that was exactly what was happening. I was not only looking at the advert, but they were gathering data on my browsing and etc. So I think this is good, but it's only data that exists. What is interesting is that it can eventually make it go out of the monopoly that actually own this data usually. Whether you mentioned autonomous vehicles, right? They all have this data. Hivemapper comes with eventually an alternative to this kind of data. Same things for the browser and Google's and etc. that have all these browsing histories and etc. If we can put this out, eventually people will build better things, because people build amazing things when you give them access to it. I mean, there's so many good examples. I want to talk about Minecraft a bit. This game is just successful because you can build whatever you want on it. That's pretty much what's amazing, and people will build better things than whatever the developers would build by themselves if they would have liked to build a game inside that. It's kind of the same things. If you unlock these data sets, and people are going to build amazing things, and if you had a layer of AI agent on top of that, and this building is even easier, and etc. So eventually we'll get somewhere where it gets super cool.
So for us, one of our core tenets was actually around being able to show proof of creation at the time of rendering something. We have something called the render graph that's really central to the process, where we actually store all of the assets used to create the scene that you see in the end. And at the moment today, everything is being trained on that final output, the video or the image. And there's an absolute battle going for, is it copyrighted and how it's being trained. But putting that aside, it's only the output being used for training. And I think we have a unique opportunity, and we have the input. And having the link between the input and that output could lead to significantly higher quality in what's generated from that data set. For us, the biggest challenge is we don't own that data. That's owned by the creators themselves. And as we watch and navigate, if they lean into this and actually allow it to be used for some form of training, and if they're comfortable with how it's used for training, I think there's a really compelling jump up in the quality of what you could see in terms of video content creation from that source data.
Yeah, I would say currently most of the models, they are actually kind of learning from the existing knowledge. So which is from the web, digitally. But there's a huge kind of gap for them to have the access to specifically real-time, real-world data. And because of that, there are kind of huge types of we call kind of real-time AI, right? Real-time AI. It could be kind of marketplace. It could be prediction market. It could be kind of all type of the AI which they need kind of immediate access to the real-time data so that they can be more functional and transaction-based. So we see those type of AI innovation can be unlocked if they can have the access to those data, right? So which are actually most of them, they are not really from the digital world, but actually from the physical world. And here we are talking about the DePin networks. All the machine networks, sensors, robotics, they are kind of constantly capture those data. But right now, those data are not really effectively used to empower the more dynamic real-time AI system. Yeah.
I think as a sector, DePin leaders, I think, are pretty often talking about ways that DePin networks can complement AI projects. But I'd like to talk about how AI projects may be complementary to DePins, specifically through orchestration and the primitives that I think make DePins more and more autonomous over time, and I guess the ways that AIs could affect that.
Yeah, actually, we are building the AI layer for DePin right now, right? So this is kind of the problem we are seeing from all the DePin networks when they are now they have kind of the right methodology to boost and deploy and scale the supply side. It's very hard for them to really kind of tap into the demand side, because most of the data, they are raw data, right? So it's not very usable. And we see there's a huge kind of usability for AI, which we are building a kind of AI agentic layer for DePin networks, so that, for example, I give you a kind of very concrete example, one weather network called Nubila, right? So we help them to deploy the one agent called kind of Kyla agent, which is kind of integrated with all the full Hello? Yeah. So this agent will be able to access the real-time weather data directly from their weather network, which they already deploy over 20,000 weather stations all around the US, right? Now, how they do that? Because of this agent, they will be able to sell their data in a very effective way, so that all those data demand side, they don't really need to kind of direct access to the weather network, but instead they just integrate with this agent API. So that's one thing. And even they provide value to the end users, which are you and me, the consumer users, or their users in their network, because we are not one super technical, so those agents, they actually kind of dramatically kind of change the way how they interact with the network with a conversational flow, right? So those are kind of we seeing a huge difference, or huge benefits agent or AI technology bring to the DePin networks, and it really kind of helps them to grow the demand side significantly.
Well, for us, AI has always been part of the process. Nothing new. At the end of you doing a render, we have a process called denoising, which is just running an AI job on the end of it. So it's kind of always been part and parcel. What's been interesting as we've watched customers start to use our GPUs and our compute is there are orchestration challenges. Although I'm very bullish on the long-term decentralized AI side, the reality is today we're not there. And so we have customers who integrate and use more than one provider. And a good example of this for us is a company called Jember, and they actually use AI for their orchestration between us and those other providers to dynamically move jobs between them, which is great. To me, that's really starting to use it. Another example we have is as we move more into the AI model side and we start generating some really cool products, we've got a team at Render Labs who are using AI to essentially decide which output is better in an automated way. And so from a consumer perspective, that means getting them to a faster, better output in a shorter method, using these AI tools that fit part and parcel with that rendering process.
These examples are really helpful for me. I actually did not think that there were many overlaps here. I think that that's great. The initial thought was kind of what you were saying around having AI help around orchestration and routing to potentially predict demand and be able to coordinate supply ahead of time. I really like the example of it actually being a demand side. That's a very cool concept around the AI as a consumer of the DePin data and the initial actor that is potentially willing to pay.
And on our side at Crunch, again, we also had a model everywhere. And for example, one of the main models is how we ensemble when we receive, let's say we have, on the 8,000 data scientists we have some works where we receive maybe 2,000 or 3,000 models. at once. And so how do you ensemble these vectors of information? So we were using a meta model here that is learning from the reputations of every participants of the network. So it's pretty much what's also enabled by having an actual verifiable track record on chain for every of these people, and then you can have a model on top that can decide who is trustable, and you can have a trust score for each of these participant. For Crunch is participant of the network, but in DePin protocol it could be, I don't know, a node with Helium, whatever, one of the driver taking picture with HiveMapper, whatever. So it's a big part because it's actually how we aggregate the output. Like how do you go from a network to something that you give to a customer when you could have different answers from the network, right? And especially in our case, when you work on noisy data, then there is even an interest in having this kind of averaging together. And then I totally agree with you guys. I think AI agents are enabling a universal standard. Before, if I would like to work on a render, I would have needed 2 engineers to read the doc for 1 month, coded an API, and etc. This now is done in like a couple of minutes, and we can work together super fast. And I think you all mentioned that, guys. So this moment of DePin where DePin protocol start to work with other DePin protocol, it's also enabled by this AI, by this agentic system that enabled me to get some compute with you guys, or get some, I don't know, some other resources that we would need at Crunch directly with other DePin protocol. Out.
Pass it back. I'm curious how each of you are thinking about teams building into the decentralized AI space, but balancing decentralization with performance. And I guess kind of the ideal middle ground between the two.
So I think there is no universal answer. Neither depends on what you do. At Crunch, it's very difficult because, for example, we have a customer that will need a... Okay, cool. So we have one customer that needs us to operate really, really fast. We work on Forex market with them. It's an OTC market, and the backend is currently running at 60 microseconds. So with 60 microseconds, you have no way to use decentralization in the middle of that. So you need to re-centralize things, use some local server. You even have to deploy the product somewhere next to that customer, so you don't use actually internet or nothing to be fast enough. And to do that, you have other solutions like privacy preserving techniques and etc. that allows you to do a compromise on the decentralization, but you still protect your IP. In our case, it's super important. But honestly, I think we didn't find yet. I mean, in our case, it's like customer by customer. Sometimes we can afford to be super decentralized, super secure, super safe, and let's say we have to predict something every week, then there is no problem. I can wait people on the other side of the planet to make their inference and eventually retrain their models and etc. If you need to work within the milli or even microsecond kind of threshold, it's impossible.
I strongly believe you do not need to boil the ocean. I think minimum viable decentralization is fine. I think nobody buys decentralization for the sake of decentralization. From a user perspective, they often care about something cheaper, something with some good enough quality of service. From a network perspective, you probably care about some redundancy, some permissionlessness, which can result in either better quality of service or cheaper costs for the end user. And I think you can be very reasonable as a protocol around starting out with, a few nodes. I would say from a geographical perspective, if you are a CDN network, you need some global coverage. There's potentially a geopolitical perspective as well. You don't want your whole cluster in one country that might do something all of a sudden. But I don't think you need to boil the ocean. And by the way, the market has shown with things like Hyperliquid that they're actually fine with some progressive step to decentralization.
I love that answer. For us, it's about how you position your services, right? And leveraging the benefits of DePin. So, when you look at rendering, I view two schools of rendering. There's sort of the games real-time engines, that deliver amazing fast games but have to sacrifice on something. They sacrifice on photorealism. And then you have another branch that is really the movies that you watch today, which are rendered offline to deliver that content, but the trade-off is they aren't real time. And for us, we focused on the rendering front, on those offline jobs for the exact reason, because it fit a decentralized network so well. And when you think about AI, we're taking a very similar approach. We're looking for jobs that aren't real time, that can allow through a workflow for the individual to wait. And in waiting, the benefits of cost or parallelism can come to the fore in ways that potentially other providers can't attack them. So it's very much service-focused, marrying it with those levers.
But for in the thought experiment, because we were talking about this earlier, around the really cool property of render being that the more nodes on the network, the faster the jobs are.
Yeah.
In the case where, imagine all of the nodes are in Texas. You probably don't care because it's still quicker for the end user anyway.
It doesn't really matter location-wise. When you're talking rendering, the great thing about rendering is any video animation you're watching is just frames per second. So a Hollywood movie is 24 frames per second. So that you can send a different frame to a different node, and thereby we can do minutes or hours in parallel at a fraction of what you could do locally on just one node. That's the parallelism that I'm hoping we'll see as we see more test time compute cases, really forcing the scale that we have for the render network.
Yeah, the first question will be what's the key benefits we're really looking into to have this kind of decentralization, right? So I think the beauty of decentralized networks is one network is actually a constellation of different networks or microsystems, right? So I think just the underlying mechanism is super important, which is the rules. You need to set the rules for different microsystems or DAO or regional domains. They can kind of operate effectively, which is more focused on the performance. But when they come to the problem, which are more focused on the trust, more focused on settlement, or more focused on the security, and then you need to definitely enforce the decentralization, which is the underlying mechanism to make sure a decentralized networks, they can still coordinate without a kind of trust issue. So basically in our principle, we will see on the kind of microsystem level, they have a lot of freedom to design their own systems, or even have a more centralized kind of mechanism, or more centralized even regional kind of deployment, right? So they can do their decision in local level. And then when they come to kind of the network level decisions, and then you need to enforce more a decentralized security, settlement, governance, yeah.
I think sort of in the same vein, but switching gears to governance mechanisms, how do you think teams should be approaching governance between DePin and AI networks and ensuring that they remain open, secure, and community-oriented?
So I feel strongly about moderation. I think that's the thing that comes to mind for me most. I think that if we want these networks to be adopted mainstream, we do need to have some amount of self-policing. I look at the end market structure as potentially how it evolved around torrenting, where a peer can be semi-legally liable for hosting illegal content. A lot of, when you look at the cloud providers, they have quite strict acceptable use policies. I think DePin networks need some way of self-policing. I don't know the mechanism or the implementation of it. This can apply to storage or streaming or things like that. But that's like an open question that I think needs to be solved and for these projects to talk about more openly.
It's such a moving landscape. I think generally DePin has a path, for consumers to participate in these projects and to scale around that. But as it comes to security and direction, I mean, there's some amazing advancements in folks moving towards DAOs and decentralized voting systems, but they're challenging when you have security issues and more. And I think on any of these, you're just never done. The real key on it is, as security issues come up, the protocol needs to adapt and address them, particularly as the products change, and they're so dynamic at the moment that honestly, what we're doing today won't be what we're doing in a year. I'm sure the community will move in different directions.
Yeah, I think recently A16Z, they kind of issued an article talking about they feel like foundation should be coming to the end of the era. So I think that's interesting. This is also something we are constantly looking for the solution. When we are talking about maybe a layer 1 networks, it's always there's different parties. There's a kind of foundation as a major governance body to decide maybe a treasury management or how to incentivize each of those ecosystem participants to do the work and get the incentive. But actually that's really kind of a headache for most of the governance body. But in my opinion, I feel in future, most of those kind of governance should be on protocol level, which means more technical, and then you need kind of through governance decision, community participation. But actually in future, one network, probably each of those network, in my opinion, they are one open ecosystem for a specific purpose. For example, for render, maybe it's really focused on the GPU rendering or a broader. But for our tags, we are focusing on the physical intelligence, focus on the AI DePin, right? So each of those kind of networks, they have their own purpose, but actually it's composed of many independently running companies. And those companies, they are sharing kind of the similar vision, which is this specific open ecosystem are doing. And they are also benefit from all the open source protocols and the toolings. Maybe the core team or a bunch of core developer are building. But they have very different business model. And those decisions should be made on the local level or on the specific company levels. So that those type of structure will not only rely on kind of one foundation. To me, the foundation is still kind of can see as a centralized entity. And then it's kind of go back, the problem go back to the foundation, and then the foundation is serve as a kind of centralized entity problem, yeah.
And I think this is one of the unique things in DePin is that for the first time in crypto, you kind of interact with the real world. So you cannot enforce something with a smart contract, right? It's a real world. There's real companies, and maybe you will never know how much this guy is selling the thing that he's buying on your protocol, right? You have no idea. You cannot figure it out. So yes, maybe we come with the reflex of things that happened in the past, so voting and etc. But I think in DePin, the thing that really works in terms of governance is positive reinforcement with incentives. That really works. And then eventually you have this company that are going to come and build on your network, or this group of people that are going to, organize themselves, create a company, incorporate, bring some GPU for render, or, gear their car with a camera for Hive Mapper, only with incentives, because that's the only thing that works. I mean, I have no child, but I have nephew and niece, and I see how it works. The incentives work super well when you give, and also in our community was the same. At the moment, we were trying to slash the reward of people, when people were not working on the right direction. Didn't really work. The only thing that works is that, okay, let's create value, let's share all this value together. How do I put together this incentive? But you still need an inception decision that says, okay, what are these direction. How are we going to distribute these incentives? And if everybody find that smart, the market will embrace that idea, and eventually this mechanism end up loaded with money and start sending the incentive, and then the magic happen.
I also don't want to be like too direct. It feels like I might be taking the other side of this, but like I don't think that leadership and decentralization are mutually exclusive. I'm not sure I'm framing it right in the sense that you can have like a core team or like a labs or a foundation or like whatever you want to call it, just be like the decision maker of the policy. And I don't think we need to put this to a DAO vote. Like I have way too much PTSD working with DAOs, and I don't think that it's the best mechanism for decision making and governance. And I think it's totally fine if they're just like a core group of people that that just say, here's the things we can do, here's things we cannot. And I think that's totally fine in many cases. Whether or not it's possible at like an infrastructure layer around like how do you do like monitoring and verification of these policies, I don't know. But I'm personally pro some flavor of centralized governance.
Yeah, just adding on that, of course you need, like, it's important, but then you could not really embrace the DePin model as much, because there is this, the incentive mechanism is beautiful. You do much more by distributing and having, you know, more people involved. But yeah, without core team, like people, you need to shove the product inside the customers sometimes. They don't, I mean, I'm speaking to institutions that spend $2 million a year in compute. Right? They never heard about, you know, render, and, you know, they never heard about you guys if you don't go and sell that product and do the sell. But you can have incentive around that still and say, okay, if you do a sell, then you get a cut of that sell, you know, and then you can push people to do the job.
As we wrap up here, I'm curious what products or use cases each of you are looking forward to at this convergence of AI and DePin over the next couple years.
I can go. I mean, obviously, I'm very motion graphics and artist focused. For us, we're really excited. I see a couple of things converging. One, we're getting closer and closer towards better 3D content. You know, we started last year with a first step into that with Apple jumping into the ring. But I think this year we'll see more of that, and I think more 3D content creation. Why that's exciting to us is it takes infinitely more power. But why I'm actually more excited about how AI can help this is I don't believe real-time solutions for that will be generated without a combination of rendering and AI. And I think more and more we're going to have a video moment this year where, like we had with diffusion and images, we'll be at a point of narrative and control on videos that will be staggering. But it will only be an interim step as we keep moving towards 3D and immersive. And I'm very excited at what can be produced from a consumer perspective using these tools as we see the future looking out towards the combination of the two.
Yeah, so actually there's so much I'm looking forward to see all the innovation, but particularly I would say, like, you know, I really want to see more like real-time AI product. And, you know, in those products, either it could be kind of like, just like say, like certain type of marketplace, or like, you know, prediction market, or those type of kind of application, and even like physical AI applications where like humans and like machines, they can kind of coordinate with each other like lively, and where like human can contribute to the robots, and then like the robots can constantly like get the active feedback or context directly from like human and also the environment. I feel like those things are happening right now, and I believe like in future, like I don't see like AI is a tool, but I see like, you know, AI and the human are co-thinkers. Like eventually, like if the AI really have the intelligence, you know, now I would say like, you know, AI still like have the knowledge, but the intelligence part is not really original. Still need kind of like the input from the human. But eventually I feel like, you know, at least like my preferred future will be like human AI co-thinking future. Yeah.
I'll give more like an infrastructure view. I think we are vastly underestimating the demand for both compute and, by extension, energy over the next decade. So you need to fact check this. I was talking to someone earlier who said for an 11 Labs API call, they do audio generation, it's 40 cents. And then separately, I was talking to another company that does multimodal inference for deepfakes, separately terrifying. But if I prompt, make Dmitry a pope, there's like a 10-second video that costs $1.40 for them. And I think we need to collapse that down to cents per inference. And like Sam Altman had a blog post a few weeks ago where he said that the cost of intelligence will collapse down to the cost of electricity. And so by extension, the more electricity and compute you have, the more you can do with it. And you already have, I think Dubai signed something with OpenAI to have like free OpenAI Pro for like the citizens there. So you're already seeing this at like a nation state level. And I think like that's where DePin becomes like very interesting. It's like, how can you coordinate heterogeneous resources around the world, from individual GPUs to medium and large size data centers, to deliver on this vision? Because I think the demand is very real and very global. So for me, it's like just more of compute in a efficient enough way, I think will do a lot for the world.
And on my side, you said AI or AI and DePin? Okay. So on the AI side, I think we just passed this moment where we're going to be able to uncover a lot of things. And for example, now we're building models at Crunch with the Broad Institute of Harvard and MIT, looking at cells for cancer research. They're not doing it. We talk about with spine surgeons that are looking at spine radiology. They are not doing it. They don't have computer vision on that. So it goes even deeper than LLMs, because we are all focused on LLM at the moment. But there is so many fields that don't even leverage like the previous generation yet. And Crunch is at the forefront of that. So many things that we are about to uncover. The model we are building as well at Crunch will give the capability of rewinding time and rewatch time with an LLM, and so create features, kind of a modern archaeology, digital archaeology. You'll be able to go back in time and rebuild archaeological content in a way that was impossible and feasible today. It's enormous what we're able to unlock. That's really what I am looking forward in AI now, is that we get more chance to cure some very bad disease, more chance to understand why humanity is here, and why we're doing what we do, and etc. And there is so many models that needs to be built that is just super interesting. I think that's really my wish. Everybody is focusing on these AGI things, but that's just the interface. Right? It's just very nice to interface with this, with digital world without having to code or without having to do anything. That's amazing. The AI agent as well is amazing, but behind there is AI systems and AI application are all chain of values, and you have models that are more statistics behind, from computer vision, classifier, rankers, and everything. We don't realize, but they are everywhere in our life, right? You come here thanks to Google Maps. You watch a video on a thread that was ranked by something. You watch a movie thanks to a ranker on Netflix. You buy something on Amazon. It's also a ranker. Like, algorithms are everywhere, and we are soon able to unlock all this data and navigate through this data in an autonomous way. That's also what AI agent can do. We can launch an algorithm and let it navigate the data by itself and eventually find something.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate this talk. It's definitely been my favorite one of the day. Let's get a round of applause for Gene, Dmitry, Trevor, and Jing.
Thank you.